Hare Krishna. Welcome back to another session of Reading Retreat Labs. So, in the previous sessions, we are reading the chapter number 2 of the canto number 1 of Śrīmad Bhāgavatam. We have completed till verse number 20. And in case you have missed the classes, then you can also refer to the previous editions in the YouTube, or you can also read it from the online database. As usual, if you do not have a hard copy of the Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, you can always contact the nearest ISKCON center or ISKCON temple, or you can always contact me so that you can get all this hard copy. Because the kind of experience which you have in the reading the hard copy, we may not get in that in soft copy or PDF or online. So it is always recommended to go for the hard copies. So now let's then, without any delay, let's start with the verse number 21, canto number 1, verse chapter number 2, verse number 21. And as usual, we'll be reading only the translation and purport. So SB 1.2.21. Translation. Thus, the knot in the heart is pierced, and all misgivings are cut to pieces. The chain of fruitive actions is terminated when one sees the self as master. Purport. Attaining scientific knowledge of personality of Godhead means seeing one's own self simultaneously. As far as the identity of the living beings as spirit self is concerned, there are a number of speculations and misgivings. The materialist does not believe in the existence of the spirit self, and empiric philosophers believe in the impersonal feature of the whole spirit without individuality of the living beings. But the transcendentalists affirm that the soul and the supersoul are two different identities, qualitatively one but quantitatively different. There are many other theories, but all these different speculations are at once cleared off as soon as Sri Krishna is realized in truth by the process of Bhakti Yoga. Sri Krishna is like the sun, and the materialistic speculations about the absolute truth are like the darkest midnight. As soon as the Krishna sun is arisen within one's heart, the darkness of materialistic speculations about the absolute truth and the living beings is at once cleared off. In the presence of the sun, the darkness cannot stand, and the relative truths that were hidden within the dense darkness of the ignorance become clearly manifested by the mercy of Krishna, who is residing in everyone's heart as the super soul. In the Bhagavad Gita 10.11, the Lord says that in order to show special favor to his pure devotees, he personally eradicates the dense darkness of all misgivings by switching on the light of pure knowledge within the heart of a devotee. Therefore, because of the personality of Godhead's taking charge of illuminating the heart of his devotee, certainly a devotee engaged in his service and transcendental love cannot remain in darkness. He comes to know everything of the absolute and the relative truths. The devotee cannot remain in darkness, and because the devotee is enlightened by the personality of Godhead, his knowledge is certainly perfect. This is not the case for those who speculate on the absolute truth by dint of their own limited power of approach. Perfect knowledge is called parampara, or deductive knowledge coming down from the authority to the submissive oral receiver who is bona fide by service and surrender. One cannot challenge the authority of the Supreme and know him also at the same time. He reserves the right of not being exposed to such a challenging spirit of an insignificant spark of the whole, a spark subjected to the control of illusory energy. The devotees are submissive, and therefore the transcendental knowledge descends from the personality of Godhead to Brahma, and from Brahma to his sons and disciples in succession. This process is helped by supersoul within such devotees. That is the perfect way of learning transcendental knowledge. This enlightenment perfectly enables the devotees to distinguish spirit from matter because the knot of spirit and matter is untied by the Lord. This knot is called ahankara and it is and it falsely obliges a living being to become identified with. As soon as this knot is loosened, therefore, all the clouds of doubt are at once cleared off. One sees his master and fully engages himself in the transcendental loving service of the Lord, making a full termination of the chain of fruitive action. In material existence, a living being creates his own chain of fruitive work and enjoys the good and bad effects of those actions life after life. But as soon as he engages himself in the loving service of the Lord, he at once becomes free from the chain of karma. His actions no longer create any reaction. Now, moving to the next verse, chapter number 1, chapter number 2, verse number 22, SB 1.2.22. Translation. Certainly, therefore, since time immemorial, all transcendentalists have been rendering devotional service to Lord Krishna, the personality of Godhead, with great delight because such devotional service is enlivening to the self. Purport. The speciality of the devotional service or to the personality of Godhead, Lord Shri Krishna, is specially mentioned herein. Lord Shri Krishna is the Swayam Rupa personality of Godhead and all other forms of Godhead beginning from Sri Baladeva, Shankarshana, Vasudeva, Aniruddha, Pradyumna, and Narayana, and extending to the Purusha Avatara, Gunavatara, Lila Avatara, Yuga Avatara, and many other thousands of manifestations of the personality of Godhead are Lord Sri Krishna's plenary portions and integrated parts. The living entities are separated parts and parcels of the personality of Godhead. Therefore, Lord Sri Krishna is the original form of the Godhead, and he is the last word in the transcendence. Thus, he is more attractive to the higher transcendentalists who participate in the eternal pastimes of the Lord in forms of the personality of Godhead other than Sri Krishna and Baladeva. There is no facility for intimate personal contact as in the transcendental pastimes of the Lord at Brajabhumi. The transcendental pastimes of Lord Sri Krishna are not newly accepted. As argued by some less intelligent persons, his pastimes are eternal and are manifested in due course once in a day of Brahmaji, as the sun rises on the eastern horizon at the end of every 24 hours. Now moving to the next verse, SB 1.2.23. Translation. The transcendental personality of Godhead is indirectly associated with the three modes of material nature, namely passion, goodness, and ignorance. And just for the material world's creation, maintenance, and destruction, he accepts the three qualitative forms of Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. Of these three, all human beings can derive ultimate benefit from Vishnu, the form of the quality of goodness. Purport that Lord Sri Krishna, by his plenary parts, should be rendered devotional service, as explained above, is confirmed by the statement. Lord Sri Krishna and all his plenary parts are Vishnu Tattva, or the Lord Shiv of Godhead. From Sri Krishna, the next manifestation is Baladeva. From Baladeva is Sankarshana. Baladeva Sankarshana. From Sankarshana is Narayana. From Narayana, there is a second Sankarshana, and from this Sankarshana, the Vishnu Purusha avatars, the Vishnu or the deity of the quality of goodness in the material world is the Purusha avatara known as Kshirodakshai Vishnu or Paramatma. Brahma is the deity of Rajas, passion, and Shiva of ignorance. They are the three departmental heads of the three qualities of this material world. Creation is made possible by Brahma's quality of passion and his endeavor. It is maintained by the goodness of Vishnu, and when it requires to be destroyed, Lord Shiva does it by the Tandavan Nritya. The materialist and the fullest human beings worship Brahma and Shiva respectively. But the pure transcendentalists worship the form of goodness, Vishnu, in his various forms. Vishnu is manifested by his millions and billions of integrated forms and separated forms. The integrated forms are called Godhead, and the separated forms are called the living entities or the Jivas. Both the Jivas and Godhead have their original spiritual forms. Jivas are sometimes subjected to the control of material energy, but the Vishnu forms are always controllers of this energy. When Vishnu, the personality of Godhead, appears in the material world, he comes to deliver the conditioned living beings who are under the material energy. Such living beings appear in the material world with intentions of being lords, and thus they become entrapped by the three modes of nature. As such, the living entities had to change the material coverings for undergoing different terms of imprisonment. The prison house of the material world is created by Brahma under instruction of the personality of Godhead. And at the conclusion of a kalpa, the whole thing is destroyed by Shiva. But as far as maintenance of the prison house is concerned, it is done by Vishnu. As much as the state prison house is maintained by the state. Anyone, therefore, who wishes to get out of this prison house of material existence, which is full of miseries like repetition of birth, death, disease, and old age, must please Lord Vishnu for such liberation. Lord Vishnu is worshipped by devotional service only, and if anyone has to continue present life in the material world, he may ask for relative facilities for temporary relief from the different demigods like Shiva, Brahma, Indra, and Varuna. No demigod, however, can release the imprisoned living being from the conditioned life of material existence. This can be done only by Vishnu. Therefore, the ultimate benefit may be derived from Vishnu, the personality of Godhead. Now, moving to the next verse number 24, canto number 1, chapter number 2, verse number 24. Translation: Firewood is a transformation of earth, but smoke is better than the raw wood. And fire is better, for by fire we can derive the benefits of superior knowledge through Vedic sacrifices. Similarly, passion, rajas, is better than ignorance, tamas. But goodness, sattva, is best because by goodness one can come to realize the absolute truth. Purport. As explained, therefore, one can get released from the conditioned life of material existence by devotional service, the personality of Godhead. It is further comprehended herein that one has to rise to the platform of the mood of goodness, sattva, so that one can be eligible for the devotional service of the Lord. But if there are impediments on the progressive path, anyone, even from the platform of tamas, can gradually rise to the sattva platform by the expert direction of the spiritual master. Sincere candidates must therefore approach an expert spiritual master for such a progressive march, and the bona fide expert spiritual master is competent to direct a disciple from any stage of life, tamas, rajas, or sattva. It is a mistake, therefore, to consider that worship of any quality, any form of supreme personality of Godhead is equally beneficial, except Vishnu. All separated forms are manifested under the conditions of material energy, and is therefore the forms of material energy cannot help anyone to rise the platform of sattva, which alone can liberate a person from material bondage. The uncivilized state of life or the life of the lower animals is controlled by the mode of tamas. The civilized life of man with a passion for various types of material benefits is the stage of rajas. The Raja stage life gives a slight clue to the realization of this absolute truth in the forms of fine sentiments in philosophy, art, and culture with moral and ethical principles. But the mode of Sattva is still higher stage of material quality, which actually helps one in realizing the absolute truth. In other words, there is qualitative difference between the different kinds of worshipping methods as well as the respective results derived from the predominating deities, namely Brahma, Vishnu, and Hara. Now we'll move to the next verse. That is your canto number 1, chapter number 2, verse number 25. Translation. Previously, all the great sages rendered service unto the personality of Godhead due to his existence above the three modes of material nature. They worship him to become free from material conditions and thus derive the ultimate benefit. However, whoever follows such great authorities is also eligible for liberation from the material world. Purport. The purpose of performing religion is neither to profit by material gain nor to get the simple knowledge of discerning matter from spirit. The ultimate aim of religious performances is to release oneself from material bondage and regain the life of freedom in the transcendental world, where the personality of Godhead is the supreme person. Laws of religion, therefore, are directly enacted by the personality of Godhead, and except for the Mahajanas or the authorized agents of the Lord, no one knows the purpose of religion. There are 12 particular agents of the Lord who know the purpose of religion, and all of them render transcendental service unto Him. Persons who desire their own good may follow these Mahajanas and thus attain the supreme benefit. Now we will move to the next verse, that is verse number 26. Canto number 1, chapter number 2, verse number 26, SB 1.2.26. Translation. Those who are serious about liberation are certainly non-envious, and they respect all. Yet, they reject the horrible and ghastly forms of the demigods and worship only the all blissful forms of Lord Vishnu and his plenary portions. Purport. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, who is the original person of the Vishnu categories, expands himself in the two different categories, namely integrated plenary portions and separated parts and parcels. The separated parts and parcels are the servitors, and the integrated plenary portions of Vishnu Tattvas are the worshipful objects of service. All demigods who are empowered by the Supreme Lord are also separated parts and parcels. They do not belong to the categories of Vishnu Tattva. The Vishnu Tattvas are living beings equally as powerful as the original form of the personality of Godhead, and they display different categories of power in constitution of different times and circumstances. The separated parts and parcels are powerful by limitation. They do not have unlimited power like the Vishnu Tattvas. Therefore, one should never classify the Vishnu Tattvas or the plenary portions of Narayana, the personality of Godhead, in the same categories with the parts and parcels. If anyone does so, he becomes at once an offender by the name Pashandi. In the age of Kali, many foolish persons commit such unlawful offenses and equalize the two categories. The separated parts and parcels have different positions in the estimation of material powers, and some of them are like Kala Bhairava, Smashana Bhairava, Sani, Mahakali, and Chandika. These demigods are worshipped mostly by those who are in the lowest categories of the mode of darkness or ignorance. Other demigods like Brahma, Shiva, Surya, Ganesha, and many similar deities are worshipped by men in the mode of passion, urged on by the desire for material enjoyment. But those who are actually situated in the mode of goodness, Sattva Guna, or material nature, worship only Vishnu Tattvas. Vishnu Tattvas are represented by various names and forms such as Narayana, Damodara, Vamana, Govinda, and Adhakshaja. The qualified Brahmanas worship the Vishnu Tattvas represented by the Saligrama Shila, and some of the higher castes like the Kshatriyas and Vaishyas also generally worship the Vishnu Tattvas. Highly qualified Brahmanas situated in the mode of goodness have no grudges against the mode of worship of others. They have all respect for the other demigods, even though they may look ghastly like Kalabhairava or Mahakali. They know very well that these horrible features of the Supreme Lord are all different servitors of the Lord under different conditions. Yet they reject the worship of both horrible and attractive features of the demigods, and they concentrate only on the forms of Vishnu because they are serious about liberation from the material conditions. The demigods, even to the stage of Brahma, the supreme of all demigods, cannot offer liberation to anyone. Hiranyakashipu underwent the severe type of penance to become eternal in life, but his worshipful deity, Brahma, would not satisfy him with such blessings. Therefore, Vishnu and none else is called Muktipada, or the personality of Godhead, who can bestow upon us mukti, liberation. The demigods, being like other living entities in the material world, are all liquidated at the time of the annihilation of the material structure. They are themselves unable to get liberation. And what we speak of giving liberation to their devotees? The demigods can award the worshippers some temporary benefit only and not the ultimate one. It is for this reason only that candidates for liberation deliberately reject the worship of the demigods, although they have no disrespect for any one of them. So we will stop here. The next session onwards we will start with the verse number 27. So Hare Krishna, Śrīmad Bhāgavatam ki Jai, Śrīla Prabhupada ki